Hi, Rodney.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can, loud and clear. How are you?
Yeah, no, very well. I have had another sort of quick look at the episode.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But I have written a couple of books on the new Avengers, so hopefully I know it well enough.
Oh, good. So, yeah, I think we'll be in good hands. Yeah.
Are you a fan of the original Avengers, or?
Yes, I like both. I think it's all got different qualities, hasn't it? To different aspects to enjoy. But I would say I've got particular fondness for the new Avengers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's what I grew up with. I wasn't old enough for the old Avengers, and in fact, I didn't even realize my dad had written a whole load of the episodes when I watched the new Avengers.
Oh, right.
Because he wrote 15 of the 60s ones, but he wasn't interested in new Avengers. So for me, it was the Avengers at the time.
Yeah. So your dad was it
Roger Marshall?
Yes, that's right. Yes, Roger Marshall. Yeah.
But no, I think one of the problems with the new Avengers is a lot of the fans of the old one tend to make the comparisons, and to me, they're very different shows. You know, mid-70s was a very different time.
Well, oh yeah, absolutely. No, I would argue that the Avengers always sort of was a different show every couple of years when you had a change of companion. You went from film to videotape to film, color, black and white. It's all very, very different, I think.
Constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And in many ways, probably the new Avengers is closer to Tara King than the Ian Hendry version was at the beginning of the decade. Because, the Tara King era was a bit wacky.
Yeah.
And no, but there we are. What are your sort of other shows that you're particularly into?
I'm sort of getting more into the Saints as I do. I've done a few events for the Saints, so that's allowed me to sort of get back into that. But the Persuaders is a big one for me. And then moving away from TV, James Bond, Star Trek, kind of everything really. Sort of.
Blake Seven.
I haven't got into that yet, and I just wanted on my little list. But are you a big Blake Seven fan?
I do, yeah. I mean, I'm not a big sci-fi fan, but I always liked Blake Seven. To me, it was almost a sort of Wild West spoof, just happened to be set in space.
Yes, yeah.
And of course, a lot of the writers were Avengers writers, so there are sort of links there as well. But no, so I mean, Star Trek is fun. I think the only thing that's ever put me off Star Trek and probably The Prisoner is that they do become this cult thing that people take so seriously that you can't criticize an episode.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. I suppose the nice thing about the new Avengers is that because a lot of fans aren't kind of interested in it, there's more of a leeway to talk about it and praise it, right, perhaps.
Yes, no, I think so. Oh, we seem to have Jazz there with his ITC banner.
I better change that, haven't I? Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, I can hear you. I better change this, haven't I?
Yeah, have you not got a new Avengers one?
No, hold on. How do I change this? I need to go into... Oh, God. Why do you change it? Can't remember how I did it now.
Yeah, Zoom seemed to change it after Christmas, and I'm still getting used to some of the changes. So if we have any technical issues, I'm going to blame it on Zoom.
Yeah, all right. Don't blame it on me. No, Zoom. Where is it then? Maybe edit background. No. I can't remember how I did it. How did I do it?
I thought you were a techno wizard.
I am, but I don't use Zoom that often, do I? It'll be it'll be somewhere. I'm glad you can hear me. Usually I have to blooming press this, that, and the other to get the blooming thing going, don't I? It's probably because is it because I've joined your thing? I expect so. Let's have a look. Blur my background. See what happens then. There you go. That'll do.
Ah, lovely.
That's better, isn't it?
Yeah,
better not spoil the new Avengers with wonderful ITC, had we?
Don't start.
Aren't I naughty? How you doing, Philip? All right?
Yeah, I'm not bad. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm all right. Rest of them.
You hadn't told me that Philip is a big Persuaders fan.
Yeah. You're a fan of them all, aren't you, Philip?
Pretty much. There's a few things I haven't quite discovered, like Blake Seven we were talking about earlier. But yeah, a lot of. I've got quite an eclectic taste when it comes to these things.
Am I too dark? Can you see me all right? You two seem very light. Maybe I'll turn the light on. Hold on a minute.
No, I was only going to say, Philip, I think the nice thing is that whatever one's age is, there's always another show to discover. So our next podcast is The Champions. I'd never seen an episode of it. So I sat down.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you can actually see me now.
Well, you were saying that the other day, Jazz, that, you know, it's actually quite exciting. Well, obviously, you've seen everything, but it's nice to discover a new old show, isn't it?
Oh yeah. The Champions is one I've got to get into, because again, I've only seen bits and pieces of it.
We'll be doing a podcast on that soon, won't we, Rodney?
Yeah.
Are you a Persuaders fan, Rodney, as well as Jazz?
I love the Persuaders, and to me, it's sort of the ultimate. It's sort of trapped between 60s and 70s. It's the ultimate action adventure where the budget actually ran properly, and you got real location filming, and you know, to get Tony Curtis on the British TV show, you know, wow.
Yeah, it was quite something, wasn't it? And still is pretty unique.
Well, I don't think anything like that has quite happened before or since, has it? To actually get a Hollywood, you know, major star, because ITC normally had American stars who weren't really stars. Would that be fair enough, Jazz?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah, sort of. Definitely not A-listers.
But like to get someone who's done, you know, Some Like It Hot, some, you know, those sort of films, amazing.
Yeah, which at that time was voted, I think, the best film up until that point, you know, and still was always in the sort of top 10 of the best films ever. So yeah. So I'm running this from this DVD set. Is that right? Is everyone doing that?
Yes, that's what I've got. So I'll be still waiting.
Blurred there.
Yeah, that's the one I've got.
Yeah, perfect. We're still waiting for a couple of people to log on, but while we wait, if everybody in the audience just wants to get their copy of the episode ready to watch, we're just going to freeze on the opening shot of the episode, which I'll just work out what it is in a second.
It is the Midas Touch we're watching, isn't it?
And Midas Touch, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, the guy doing the Morse code at the beginning.
Yeah.
We'll just freeze on that.
Okay.
I mean, one of the things, obviously, depends on what DVD people are using. We might not even be looking at the same title sequence, because there's the animated ones as well as the ones that I've got on this one.
Yeah.
Because it's only actually in the UK, I believe it's only been released on DVD once. It hasn't in that box set. I don't know about other territories. I assume it's been released in a lot of countries.
I suppose if you're watching from France, or because it's been released there.
Yeah, I've got the French Studio Canal one as well.
Yeah. I think it's come out in America as well, in North America. I'm not sure about Australia. It must be out in Australia. It's out in Germany. It's been out. It's been out in Germany twice. So, sort of as an individual release, and then part of a sort of mega set thing.
Yeah.
So,
I assume there's no difference in terms of extras or anything like that.
No, well, there are different extras in those territories, but I'm thinking because it's not been restored, they'll have all used these same prints, so there won't be any difference.
Yeah, the French one has got no extras on it at all.
Yeah, it's been released a couple of times in France, I think, as well.
Yeah.
I can't remember, to be honest. It's a bit vague.
You
My
didn't do
memories
the extras, Jazz, for the British one, did you?
No. They did this sort of before I got involved, and then I did say to them, maybe you should do, in my foolishness when I was doing the Avengers, maybe we should finish off with the Avengers, but they couldn't find the Masters at the time, but the Masters have been found since. But I'm not sure if they asked me now what I would do. I'd have to have a think about it.
I mean, I just think it's a real shame that there's only one of the three leads left alive, and she is the only one who wasn't asked to contribute to the DVD audio commentaries.
Yeah.
And that's, it would be nice to see her perhaps do one if they do an HD version at some point.
Yeah, she needs to be involved. She's a key part of the show, isn't she?
I mean, from what I gather, Joanna Lumley is quite happy to talk about the Avengers. I don't. She doesn't want to do anything like this, because I did approach her agent, and she doesn't like doing virtual stuff. But an official release, I'm sure she'd she'd do it. I mean, they all, a lot of them, it's just availability and time and fitting into their schedule and things like that. It's when we were doing the Avengers, we tried to get Linda Thorson, but she was in Argentina at the time, and she said, I can do it if you fly me back first class, but of course budgets don't stretch that far. So we kind of missed her, sadly, but they got her in the end on some other releases. So, her contribute, she loves the Avengers, and we should have got her, but it was just timing, unfortunately.
I mean, Joanna Lumley has very fond memories of the new Avengers. I saw her on stage a couple of years ago, and for her, that was what made her.
Yeah, it's like Sapphire and Steel, really. She had that sort of end of 70s real good run of sort of cult shows, and it sort of put her straight back in the spotlight again, didn't it? I suppose she was in the spotlight a little bit in the late 60s, but then early 70s she wasn't really that doing much. So yeah, good for
her. So I think we should probably make a start. There is a few people missing from the audience, but they'll probably catch up at some point.
Okay.
So thank you everybody for joining me to talk about the new Avengers, the Midas Touch. It is very much appreciated. So if everyone's, so what I thought we would, how do you guys feel about me showing the videos contributions first, or should we do them afterwards? What's your preference, guys?
I don't mind.
I'll say after, if that's all right.
You do them after? Yeah. We'll crack on with the episode itself, and then we'll do them after. Okay.
Mine will start playing. It's got one of these 5 minutes.
Yeah. Let's do it before they all go funny. So if everybody's got the episodes to hand and is paused on the opening frame with the hand on the Morse code button, we'll press play in a few seconds' time. Okay, so we'll make a start. So I'll do a countdown for 5, and then we'll press play. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play.
You can turn my volume down. Sorry about
That's right.
that. Beep it away.
So this is quite a nice sort of mysterious sort of beginning, isn't it? Sort of exactly what's happening here, and the mysterious figure out the window.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
One of the things that always strikes me that I think Brian Clemens did brilliantly with the new Avengers was we've got what we call these sort of freeze frame teasers. So the teaser actually carries on after the main titles, which I thought was a great idea.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got the lovely John Carson, which reminds me, there are so many actors from the original Avengers who appear in the new Avengers. In fact, I think there are 20 actors in this episode, if you include all the extras who'd appeared before. And John Carson, well, you're a fan of John Carson, aren't you, Jazz?
Yeah, he always puts in a great performance. Never a bad performance of John Carson.
And this is the type of character you wouldn't have got in the original show, because obviously John Carson's playing this ex-agent, ex-colleague of John Steed, who's now down and out, alcoholic, homeless. You just wouldn't have got that type of sort of real character in the original show.
It's good as well that he's actually sort of grown the stubble and looks a little disheveled, but because he's a gentleman, if you know what I mean, an ex-agent, he's trying to look not as disheveled as he probably is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think it's quite a moving scene as well, because Steed in a minute is going to offer him some money, and of course that's an insult to him. He's not going to take the money off him. He's still a gentleman, even if he's a homeless gentleman.
This is, I think, where this episode really begins to sort of come to life. This whole I think if we go back to the sort of end of the end of the 70s, where the 70s was a pretty bleak decade. Don't get me wrong, there were some great things that came out of it, particularly art and music and all the sort of creative things, including television, obviously. But when you look at this is a sort of rundownness that was around Britain at the time. Heavy industry was beginning to close down. And this whole sort of car chase thing that we're going to see later, and this setting, this location, I think is brilliant. And it's great the way that you obviously, Carson's hiding away in there as a tramp. But I think this is a really strong part of this. Well, I'm going to shut up because here's the titles.
And of course, one way you can tell it is quite an early episode is, of course, doesn't have the animation titles yet, does it?
No, we basically got cuts from the first 3 episodes. So from this one and from Eagle's Nest, and what's the third one? I'm trying to remember now.
Yeah, me too. I can't remember off the top of my head.
House of Cards.
Yeah.
House of Cards.
But do you think these ones work better than the other ones?
No, I like the animated ones.
Yeah, I prefer the animated ones personally. I mean, these are all right, but they're a bit like The Professionals, aren't they? They're sort of like first attempt.
Yes.
I'd actually suggest, controversially, I actually prefer Laurie Johnson's theme tune for the new Avengers. I just think it's wonderfully 70s.
Yeah.
You've got those first few notes from the original, and then you've got a mixture of sort of military, because obviously that's Laurie Johnson's background, and then that sort of wah real 70s guitar, isn't it?
Yeah, they're picking up on 70s disco and funk there, which is to be honest, is what a lot of those sort of shows that were coming back, like Return of the Saint, did the same. So if you think of these 60s shows that had those classic themes, and then you're right there, they did do a good job on sort of updating the original versions, but then giving it a new spin as well, and an original take on it.
But what you were saying, Jazz, so right about this is broken Britain. So this disused sort of gasworks, and I'm sure this location turns up in The Sweeney, Professionals, Return of a Saint, Blake 7, and Doctor Who. So whether you're doing a sci-fi dystopia or a gritty police drama, these sort of wastelands are perfect, aren't they?
Yeah, well, industrial wastelands, aren't they? They're saying, the sort of industrial revolution has been and gone, and now this is the industrial decline, isn't it? I think this is out near Slough, isn't it, from memory?
I think it's maybe Southall.
Slough, yes. Southall. I mean, my London geography there is not brilliant, but yeah. So in the original script for this, she would have been known as Charlie, wouldn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, originally she was going to be Steed's niece. Useless piece of information there, but obviously it was Joanna Lumley's choice, Purdy, which I always thought was based on the gun, but I was reading the other day it was also based on the fashion model as well. Is it Sue Purdy?
Yeah. How do you guys think that it works now as a triumvirate? Because obviously the original Avengers was a two-hander, and then we get into the late 60s sort of ITC shows, like say the Champions and Department S, and it becomes two guys and a lady. And this is where the New Avengers have sort of picked up on that. Do you think that Gambit's a bit spare, which I always thought at the time watching it, he was only there for the action, I thought, and maybe a bit of a flirtation with Purdy. I don't know. I haven't watched the New Avengers in ages, to be honest. So
well, I
I'm
suppose
not really sure what I think.
You could argue Tara King was already 3 characters if you include Mother. I mean, what a wonderful location this is. Just look at that. That is just stunning, isn't it?
Well, and Robert Fust is directing this, who directed the original, who was an art director on the first series of the Avengers, and then ended up directing the Tara King episodes. So you've got that original sort of eye of sort of maybe slightly quirky camera angles and stuff, which is brilliant.
I like Gambit. I mean, we have to remember that Patrick Macnee's knees were gone by this point. You know, he's in his mid-50s, and I know what it's like when your knees go in your mid-50s. And I thought that the 3 of them have got, the characters have quite a warm rapport, and you can see that the actors got on well. No, sort of stick up for. And of course, Lewis Collins was in the run, wasn't he? He was in the running for this role, and ends up playing the part in The Professionals instead.
Yeah, because they have their first pairing, don't they? In is it Obsession? You get him, you know, some coincidence, but they end up obviously starring The Professionals later on.
Well, of course, and it's not totally a coincidence in the sense that Lewis Collins wasn't in the original Professionals. You know, they stopped after 4 days, and he replaced Anthony Andrews, and it was based on his performance in the New Avengers.
Yeah. But here you see, this would have never happened in the original Avengers, that they would have gone to Heathrow Airport. No. I mean, in the original Avengers, is, you know, that you do get the locations, but you would never get something that says this is actually a sort of international show, if you know what I mean.
Well, we've got Ronald Lacey, another person who'd been in the original show. How do people? I'm not totally happy by the mid-70s of having a sort of fake Oriental character. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not convinced by that either.
Doctor Who did it, I think, in a Tom Baker story. There was
Tan Wang Chiang.
Yes, and obviously that is a quite famous example of you know, wouldn't happen today, but
probably got away with it a bit more probably in Doctor Who for some reason. I don't know why, but I
don't know whether it was just sort of a culture thing or sort of a, you know, I assume there was lots of actors around, you know, of the, you know, that would be Oriental and could sort of play it, but
I mean, I think it's the sort of thing that you got away with in the 60s if Burt Kwok wasn't available. But I think probably by mid to late 70s, because I mean, nearly all the other ethnic characters in this episode are played by properly ethnic actors. But you are right, Jazz. I mean, John Carson really does look as if he's had a week sort of sleeping rough, doesn't he?
Yeah, but still trying to keep it in his best, though, if you know what I mean.
Well, he's still an agent,
he's proud,
mode, isn't he?
Yeah, he's proud, isn't he?
Yes.
I mean, it's one of those things that always strikes me with the New Avengers, that it's very much location driven, isn't it? We haven't got many of the elaborate sets the original show had, but we're out on location an awful lot.
Yeah, and I think that you know, by that time the British audience and global audience that's what they demanded. You couldn't fool people with just endless sort of redressing of sets that have been used 2 or 3 times already. I mean, I do think that's a real positive for this show. And like I said, the Southall Gasworks is just a great location and brilliant for all types of action, car chase, running chases, hiding out if you're a tramp, everything. And like I say, used in a lot of other 70s shows.
Well, I mean, this is a big budget. This is £125,000 an episode, which at that point is a lot of money. And okay, they ran into money problems in the second series, but this is a much bigger budget than the Professionals.
Yeah, I think that shows as well. Although, again, Professionals, it was predominantly location filmed.
We should mention David Swift as obviously it's whether it's a deliberate sort of Goldfinger sort of, because we've got Tanya Mallet, haven't we, at the beginning as Steed's girlfriend. So whether that was a little joke because of the gold theme, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, there's always those little in gags like that. I suppose we should say to the car enthusiasts here, that's an Aston Martin DBS. I hope I'm getting that right. It's definitely the same car as sort of suede as Roger Moore's Aston Martin BS1. And this is a Jag XJS that they're driving in, which I think was a V12. I'm not a huge car nut, but someone will correct us if we're wrong, no doubt.
I think we covered a Westway here. Well, it's a great car chase, and I love the fact that they're having the argument over who directed what film, etc.
Yeah,
because there is that little quirky relationship between the two of them. I mean, Gambit would like to sleep with Purdy, but he knows he probably never will, and they do have this genuine sort of friendship, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. He's never ever gonna sleep with her. She's never gonna let him. But she's sort of playing with him in a way, but like not silly sort of way. The wheel spins there. That looked like it was actually Gareth Hunt driving, although that bit there didn't. Definitely a stunt driver.
Yeah. I wonder
of all the doubles and stunt drivers and stunt men we're going to see when it does finally come out on Blu-ray, if it ever does.
Yeah, the danger is that nobody expected us to see it on these huge screens or on HD or anything.
Well, look, someone's told us the DBS is a 6-cylinder one. Plate is false. Thank you, Joseph Lloyd. Aston Martin turns into an Audi 1000 coupe soon. Do you know what? I wouldn't have noticed that yet. So I'm glad. Thanks, someone's on the ball with cars. That's great.
I do wonder how Purdy got the orange, because if you look at the scene, how the windows are always up on the car, but I suppose it doesn't really matter too much.
Well, did you see that the guy who actually had the orange is actually, when he tipped, he actually threw them as well. So if you just watch his hands, he literally goes like a little sort of nudge like that to make sure it's right.
Yeah.
No, I mean the Swift's character I rather like, because it is still sort of almost this mad sort of diabolical mastermind. And there's something slightly seedy about him, because he's actually really turned on by gold. In fact, he'll say later to Purdy, you are beautiful, but you don't do anything for me. I need to touch gold.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a straight version of Goldmember, isn't it? Austin Powers. And I think somebody on IMDb did describe this episode and review as the Avengers meets Goldmember.
Yeah.
So,
how long are Joanna Lumley's legs there?
Very long.
Yeah. When I say she's fit, I'm going to say that I mean that as in an athletic sense. Although she is she's a very beautiful lady as well. But
being a model background, then she would be.
Although a second ago they were right behind him, and now they seem to be like 100 yards behind him. artistic license, I suppose.
It's a nice scene because it's what you do get more continuity in the new Avengers than you got on the old, and we do have 2 or 3 episodes where either Gambit saves Purdy's life or Purdy saves Gambit's, and they have these sort of little quips about it, and I rather like that continuity. I don't know who the actor is who's playing the henchman here. Does anyone know?
It'll be one of the stunt boys, but I can't remember all of their names. Hopefully someone will pop it in the messages. Oh, he's got a gun now. Look at that.
It's a nice bit of.
It's funny. I did watch this when we were talking about doing this a few months ago, but that was the first time in ages, and I've completely sort of forgotten about it all.
I do like these.
Sorry, go on, Philip.
I was just going to say I like the speed up running. I think that was again early 70s.
I think one of the downsides of having little clips from these episodes on the titles is that you've sort of already spoilt some of the shock to come. I think that's another reason why I prefer the animated ones. But again, fabulous. That is just stunning.
Yeah. Well, that's a shot that's low down to give you the sense of the size of the building,
but it's almost like a set on location, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, Robert Fuse did really great stuff there. Very nicely placed as well, that danger high voltage sign just back there, right next to where she was standing. All of these little things I thought about. He would have scoured that location and noticed that sign and noticed that thing, and that's a very sort of Peter Hammond style shot. And these sorts of shots, because most most directors would have seen her walking along, but to give it that sense of scale that she's up, perspective.
I'm trying to remember, did Robert Fuse, did he direct one of the Clemens early 70s horror sort of films?
Did he do one, yeah.
Did he do that and Soon the Darkness?
And Soon the Darkness, yeah, I'm pretty sure he did.
Because he is a lovely director. You can see he's been an art designer.
Yeah. He was a lovely guy, actually. I did a commentary with him and I went and down to his place and met him and spent the day with him. And he was absolutely a real sweet guy. Just properly, happy to talk, spare time, go over things, just really nice bloke.
I'm never sure when I watched that scene whether Purdy is justified kicking him off the gantry to his death, because he's not armed at that point, and it's kind of that's a slight direct.
But that's where you need that bit of grit in the 70s Avengers, as in you probably wouldn't have got that in the 60s Avengers. So I actually think that sort of fits in with the decade.
Just doesn't seem quite earned in the same. It's not like he pulls a gun and is about to shoot her or anything. So whether that's just me being a bit picky, perhaps.
Yeah, but he would have bumped her off earlier, so it's fair enough, I think. Now.
Yeah.
No, I mean, as Jazz says, the world has moved on, and I think probably the big challenge for Brian Clemens was how to maintain some of that sort of fantasy Avengerland spirit, but actually make it a little bit tougher for a very new context, wasn't it?
Yeah. Look at its print, it's shocking though, isn't it? Look at the quality of it. I mean, that scene back there, the mantelpiece was supposed to be white, it was green. I mean,
it desperately needs an HD version, doesn't it?
Yeah, so ropey. I mean, we've been spoiled because with Blu-ray and lots and lots of old telly coming out on Blu-ray, we're now used to seeing it so pristine, and then you go back to this and you think, God blimey. But going back beyond that, when it was on VHS, the difference between DVD and VHS is a stark one. So I suppose we shouldn't really complain too much.
Well, hopefully eventually they'll sort out.
So now on a Blu-ray, you'd be able to read that invitation perfectly. You'd be able to just freeze frame that and you'd be able to read all the writing, but you just can't read it on this.
No.
Philip, what do you think of Steed's stud, as in, you know, the country residents, etc.? Because I suppose for me, Steed is in London, you know, in a suave Muse apartment, and I appreciate the character is now older, but I do feel a bit uneasy about the fact that each week he's sort of got a new girlfriend, and it's sort of, I don't know.
Well, it does contrast it nice, doesn't it? You say with the original show, and it is an easy indicator of the passage of time, and I quite like it. I think the Playboy element is fun. And of course, you didn't get that in the original series, so maybe that again was part of it, making it a bit more sort of grown up. I haven't got a problem with it really. It's quite interesting to see who Steve's going with from week to week. But
I mean, this is quite a weird psychedelic party, and then of course we're going to get the aftermath when Gambit comes and everyone's dead. It's suddenly gone from psychedelic to actually quite disturbing.
Yes.
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of higher body count in the new Avengers than there was in the original Avengers. Although I know, like in, say, like the Emma Peel season, they're so formulaic that before the title, someone's died, and it's, you know, but it does seem to be a higher body count in this.
I think here,
from memory.
And I think also when people die in the new Avengers, it feels more real. It sort of counts for more.
Yeah.
It's sort of not, right, well, 5 people must die before dinner time. It's a bit more.
These fancy dress sort of kind of discos of the 70s. There's a Return of the Saint. Well, I think it might even be 2 episodes where there's a Brave Goose, where there's a very similar sort of thing with, you know, fancy dress people in masks and people getting bumped off who they think they are. And I don't really remember the discos of the 70s being like that, but obviously they were. It's quite a...
You weren't old enough for the discos of the mid-70s.
No, well, I wasn't in the disco music, was I either? Well, I was. School discos. They were a thing, I can tell you.
And the bit of music that's playing in the disco scene does turn up again, I think, in the Angels of Death episode.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because there was a soundtrack release, wasn't there, of some New Avengers music, and the Midas Touch I think has the has the most tracks from any of the episodes. I don't know whether more music exists or, you know, what condition that kind of stuff might be by now.
I think from what I heard, Laurie's still got the master tapes, but and that goes back to the Avengers in the 60s as well. But he's never always seems to want to re-record them and never release the original versions, which is a great shame, because I know that a couple of record companies have approached him in the past and asked to release them, and he's basically said, you can pay me to re-record them and I'll re-record them, and not really got the idea that actually people want
the
originals and what they heard on the TV, not a new orchestra replaying them, because it's never the same. Even if they're playing the same notes, it's never the same feel, the same sound of the studio or anything, you know. So,
well, I mean, for the theme tune,
he needs to put his handbrake on. That car's rolling back.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Yes.
For the theme tune, he wrote it in literally a few minutes. He was on his way to the restaurant Pinewood, and suddenly these bars were in his head, and he rushed back to his office and said he literally sat down, wrote it, and 15 minutes later he was having lunch.
Yeah.
Which I guess is how it sometimes goes, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing here as well, because obviously the original Avengers was at Teddington, but when it moved to film, it went to Elstree. And they didn't go to Elstree with this. They went to Pinewood, which is a story I've never been able to get to the bottom of.
Well, I can tell you why that is. The whole of Elstree was booked out for Star Wars.
Of course.
And when they found out, they had to go to Pinewood instead.
I hadn't even thought of that, you know. The whole of Elstree was booked out for Star Wars. Yeah, of course it would be, wouldn't it?
Yes, good point. And of course, you've got the wonderful Pinewood Gardens and Manor House, which they use obviously to full advantage.
It's a huge bonus. I mean, we were talking about Man in a Suitcase, weren't we, Jazz, months ago? And you know, that ability to use Pinewood, there's so much more there, isn't there?
Well, not being funny, it's a better studio complex. You know, the it's geared for feature films and big budget feature films, whereas Elstree always was a bit of a porridge factory. You know, I don't mean that in a horrible way. It's just that's kind of the reputation it had, sort of cheap and cheerful, bang them out. You know.
But rather than using that over familiar backlot, you have got all those gardens and the bridge and that wonderful, is it Heatherden Hall or whatever it's called?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't actually see much of Steed Stud. I don't think we ever get into the sort of kitchen or anywhere. We don't get any idea of him cooking meals or anything. It's sort of, I don't know whether he just relies on ladies to do the cooking for him.
I thought you were going to say we don't see much of Steed, because we, to be honest, in this one we haven't really seen him, have we? Except for at the start, and then him sort of briefing Gambit and Purdy.
Well, he felt, didn't he, in series 1 that he was sort of hived off a bit.
Yeah, he's kind of become more like Mother, hasn't he?
Yes.
You know, in those Tara King episodes.
But then you see when he is central, I mean, there's one episode, I think it's Dead Men Are Dangerous, where Purdy flirts with Steed and actually hints that she'd like to sleep with him. And actually, I don't think that works. I think he's too old for that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it goes back to would it work just with Steed and Purdy, and I think if you would have suddenly somehow erased Gambit from the equation, I think we'd all miss him terribly. I think there is something that Gareth Hunt brought, and it sets it apart from the other Avengers, if nothing else, to have that trio.
Yeah, I think you need all three. I mean, someone said to me on Twitter yesterday, oh, I wish Purdy hadn't been in it and it had just been Steed and Gambit. But actually, you know, ever since the Honor Blackman era, part of the charm of the Avengers is having a sort of kick-ass female. And I do think the triumvirate works really well. You can see that they got on. You know, that comes over on the screen.
Yeah.
I mean, there is this, obviously, I've got the sound down on the film, so I don't know if it's at this moment, but there is that wonderful where Steed is asked, who's Freddie? And he says, who was Freddie?
Yeah.
Because he sort of ceased to become someone in their world, I suppose, isn't he? Is that the sort of hard line of what it's like?
There's a lovely epitaph he gives Freddie when he's talking to Gambit and saying that Freddie was a man that never quite forgot who he used to be. I thought that was a rather nice,
lovely,
a nice line.
That's Steed's Rover, isn't it? That's we used to call them the Wedge in the 70s. You remember, everyone's got a Rover Wedge. Yeah, I think it's a P3500, 3.5 litre. Someone ought to correct us.
Joseph will correct you.
Yeah,
because he knows his cars.
What that Rover is, Joseph.
He knows his cars.
Yeah.
And of course, a quarry location, always a favourite with 60 shows, isn't it? So it's almost a nod back to 60 shows here, because whether it's Avengers or ITC, eventually a quarry turns up.
Yeah. And usually a car driving over the top of it, and a white Jag, and ending up in the bottom of it. Yeah, Rover 3.5 litre. There you are. See.
I mean, John Carson is such a fabulous actor. He's in one of my dad's Avengers, Dial a Deadly Number, and he's so terrific in every series. You know, he's great in Hammer, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, he's an actor who always gives a quality performance. You know, whether that be in the Saints, say like Sabao, or you know, New Avengers, or anything he did. he was just always Mr. Reliable to give you quality.
And playing anything from here, a sort of a flawed hero, to he can be a really villainous villain.
Yeah. It's not quite impressive as the White Jag, is it? That was that old Ford Anglia going over a sort of about 20 feet.
I like the detail on the car being run down and missing the gear knob, gear stick knob, little things like that are good.
Well, of course, I mean, the cars in the real series were a disaster.
Yeah,
an absolute disaster. And in fact, I think Brian Clemens tried driving Joanna Lumley's MG once, and the numbers on the gear stick weren't even in the correct place. British Leyland were just a total disaster. I think the only time they got a decent vehicle was the Honda bikes that Purdy rides.
Because there was a TR7 in this as well that I think that always was breaking down. They had a similar situation with the Jags in Return of the Saint. They weren't reliable, and this is obviously around the same time.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, I think that the leads went with Brian Clemens to some sort of vehicle exhibition, and they were meant to be with British Leyland on their stand. They turned up and there was no one on the British Leyland stand. So Mercedes asked them over for a glass of champagne. And I think that probably tells you a lot about Britain in the mid-70s, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. People forget though, don't they? I mean, it's still fresh in my mind in a way, even though, like, you know, I suppose I was a teenager right at the end of it. But, you know, you remember these things when you're a kid, don't you? Maybe not in exact detail, but you remember the sort of feel of it, you know?
Well, I mean, normally in Adventureland, they don't make any topical references, but I mean, it's not in this episode, but in Sleeper, when there are bank heists going on all over London, and they talk about the Bank of England, and Steve says, no point in going there. There's no money in the Bank of England. Try a Middle East bank or an American one. And I think this is where we were, as I said, broken Britain, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were.
I mean, after all, this is a show that relied mostly on French money and then Canadian money.
Yeah, and hence why it ran into money troubles at, you know, towards the second series, well, in the middle of the second series, wasn't it, really? I mean, it only came around really because of that Laurent Perrier champagne commercial in France, from the I think it was 75, and they got Linda Thorson and John Steed Patrick Manee back together and sort of did an Avengers style advert, and that's where the interest was sort of resurrected. But, you know, Brian, he was always trying to get the Avengers going again and again and again, you know.
All the professionals.
It'd be the new Avengers, you know. We'd had it in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and yeah.
I think that French director, Rudolph Roffey, thought the series was still going on because it was always being shown on French TV. So he assumed it had never stopped. Yeah. Because someone asked me this morning, was Linda Thorson ever asked to do the new Avengers? Now, my understanding is she wasn't. But then, of course, Brian hadn't cast her in the old Avengers either, had he? He'd come back when she'd already been cast. So.
Yeah, he always saw her as John Bryce's girl. I don't mean girl as in a put down, but, you know.
Now, Joanna Lumley
that's how they were known, the Avengers girls, you know. So, like, you know, Diana was the one he cast, and, you know, yeah.
Now, she injured herself making this scene. I only read this yesterday, so I'm not an expert on it. But she turned her ankle because she tried doing the stunt herself.
Trouble is, you know, stunt doubles are all well and good, but as we've seen and discussed in our podcasts, you know, unless you're an absolute spit and you can do it, it's always going to show up. Even on DVD, it showed up, and now with Blu-ray, it's so obvious. So, like, I think by the 70s, they'd realised that, you know, you're going to have to get them to do it if they can.
Well, I think William Gaunt said his stunt double on the Champions looked perfect from the front, but had a huge backside and a ball patch. And of course, you only ever saw him from the back.
Yeah.
Is that Jeremy Child, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Who, of course, is going to patronise Purdy.
Lots of them do in this show. Lots of the men patronise her, don't they? And then she shows actually, I can do it just as you can, well as you can.
But I tell you, that Purdy cut, which apparently really annoyed Clemens when she came back with it, it's one of the great things about the show, because it really caught on, didn't it? It became a fashion trend.
Yeah, it was all the rage for young women at the time to have that, I think she looks so much better as well than those than in those early publicity shots where she's wearing all those flowery dresses and she's got long hair, and she much more looks the part. Okay, she's tomboyish, but she looks.
But that's part of the charm, isn't it?
Yeah, she's going to give you a good kicking. Whereas in the early shots, I think she just looks a bit. Don't get me wrong, she looks too feminine.
Yes. No, this was the perfect sort of a fashion statement in terms of having a haircut.
Well, and if you think about what was going on in the art and music world at the time, all the hippies had gone out and it was all punk, new wave, everyone was cutting their hair short, and it was, guys and girls were cutting their hair short, so in that way, she was bang on it. I think with Gambit, what it is his suits. I don't know quite why, but they just they don't quite fit right to me. Steed always looks impeccable.
Well, he refused, didn't he? Patrick refused to go for the 70s flares. He said, I'm Steed, I drive fashions, I don't follow them. Whereas obviously Gareth Hunt was happy to go for the 70s browns and flares. And
I think that's probably what it is.
You think he looks a bit uncomfortable in the suits, Jazz?
I don't know. I think they're not quite right in their fitting. I don't know if they're either slightly too tight or he's a bit, in it.
Well, I suppose the only thing I can think of is that there is a reference, I think, in at least a couple of the episodes of Gambit coming from a much more humble background than Steed, and you could almost argue that it is sort of a character thing. He's trying to fit into this posh world, but he doesn't quite belong there, and maybe his suits being not quite right would sort of be a true to character.
I think the thing is he doesn't need a waistcoat.
No, probably not.
He doesn't need a waistcoat, and if he didn't have the waistcoat, he might be a bit more kind of.
And of course, Steed reminds him that he doesn't belong in this world in a few of the episodes, because Gambit is a working class guy who's been in the Navy and left school at 14 and didn't go to prep school and all of these things, which I rather like.
Yeah, I think we can write off the suits that don't quite work maybe as that sort of part of the character potentially, rather than a costume designer problem.
She never looks phased, does she? I mean, despite the fact that she's surrounded by this mad man and his henchmen, she looks as if, well, case of rot.
Yeah, doesn't she ever?
I think what's nice about these shows, you do get a lot of actors who say, we mentioned crossovers between the original Avengers and the new Avengers, actors-wise, but also an actor here that was in the Persuaders and all sorts of other. So you often see the same faces, don't you, sort of popping up from time to time.
Yeah, old ITC rep, isn't it? That the Avengers borrowed. We should point that out because they were in ITC shows a long time before they were in any Avengers.
Yeah, but then you've got people like John Carson who'd been, in the Avengers, and David Swift, he was a barber in one of the Avengers episodes. I'm sure Clemens surely would have been looking to provide that connective tissue, just as Laurie Johnson's first 5 notes of the theme tune are from the original. I'm sure they were constantly looking to see who can we bring in, who's, Ian Hendry is the obvious example.
Yeah.
This is a nice set. I remember thinking this the other week. I loved all just the pure stuff, red doors and the white pieces and white walls.
It reminds me very much of a Linda Thorson episode set. I can't think which one off the top of my head.
Reminds me of the Superlative 7. I'm sure there's a set with Donald Sutherland that's similar as well.
Yeah.
I like the two-tone, you know.
Yeah, well, red and white always work really well. And obviously now with film, by the mid-70s, they'd worked out how to film red. Because if you go back to a lot of the 60s shows that were made on film, red was always the problematic color that they always struggled with. But they've obviously, you know, as a lot of that was because they weren't experienced enough, even though they were, you know, very experienced technicians. But they mastered it by then. So that red and white works wonderfully well.
No, so this is where Gambit comes into his own, because Clemens had said he wanted the fighting to be very different in the New Avengers. I think he said he wanted a blur of action. And that's what you tend to get with him. Gambit stands still, suddenly there's a blur of action and he's still again.
Yeah, and those little camera blurs, that's very Robert Fust, where, you know, you saw the girl appear in focus after being out of focus through the set.
And if anybody's wondering if the Chinese lady looks familiar, she has appeared quite recently in Johnny English Reborn. She was the killer cleaner in that one. So
Right, I've not seen that.
Yeah, it was quite a sort of mad, well, as you would imagine for an actress in film. This old sweet lady that was an assassin and tried to kill everybody basically. And so she's still going.
Sweet old lady assassin. That sounds like an Avengers plot, doesn't it?
It is.
Girl
Yeah,
from Auntie.
Yeah.
An old lady with the knitting needles and stuff.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
I like the fact that with Gambit, there's the mixture. He's very charming, he's witty, but he's pretty ruthless as well.
See, now that shot there of Purdy in the center of that almost like sundial thing, that is so Peter Hammond original Avengers.
Yeah,
So
Don Lever and Peter Hammond. And
yeah, so they picked that up, you know, and all of these little things, like, you know, I'm pointing at my screen here, but, you know, you just get that sort of middle section where there's outsides are all black and stuff, like peering through like a keyhole or cracking the door or whatever. So there are definite nods in direction back to what's been before.
But as you said earlier,
I'd have loved to have been a kid and have been able to play on this. You would not have been able to stop me running up and down those stairs and exploring this place back then if I'd have lived there. That's the thing, like when we were kids, like we talk about the 70s, when we were kids, there were so many derelict buildings that you just run round and go and play in and make camps or bases in, and yeah, no one seemed to care back then.
Now they're all pretty posh houses, aren't they?
Yeah, when redeveloped and stuff.
Yeah, gentrification and
yeah.
There is something very, it sounds really patronizing if I say sweet, but there is something really sweet about Purdy. She's got a real impish charm.
She has, yeah. She's the best thing in the show for me by a long way. And I don't mean that like, oh, you know, pretty girl, but I think her acting is just great throughout. I don't think she really gives a duff performance in any of them. Although I don't really remember some of the, it's been so long since I've watched them. Some of the later ones that are in Canada, which aren't great stories, I don't really remember that well, to be honest. So
I think the problem is by the time they went to France, obviously Brian Clemens is thinking about the professionals. The two shows do overlap in terms of production, and he'd moved on. I mean, he didn't even go out to Canada for the Canadian episodes. I think Joanna Lumley walks off the set in one of the Canadian episodes because she's had enough.
Yeah.
And also, you know, Toronto is not Avengerland, is it?
No.
No.
You know.
Well, even when they went to France for K is for Kill, isn't it? That's when.
Yeah, I don't mind that one.
Really?
Well, because if you
Yeah.
say, I mean, the French countryside can sort of almost be like the English countryside, can't it?
I suppose so.
But I mean, Toronto.
Yeah.
And, you know, they get arrested and Gambit's in prison. Well, you don't get, it's like Dukes of Hazzard.
God help us.
Sorry to dumb it down.
Blimey. Yeah.
Well, I think Case for Kill is quite a good story.
I love it. I loved the double episode.
Yeah, but I think sometimes it feels like it's stretched a bit too far. But it could probably be a better hour and 20 rather than an hour and 40. But apart from that,
I think this is often the problem with a sort of two-parter. Jazz and I were talking about one of the Saint two-parters, weren't we? That became a film. And you sometimes end up with something that, as you say, Philip, would have made a brilliant hour and 10 minutes. And it's not quite enough for the 100 minutes or...
Yeah, well, the Baron one with the boat is an obvious example of that, you know. But at least on the film, they cut 10 minutes of the boat bit.
Great red again, though, in this set.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you were saying they were struggling with that colour, were they? So
in the original
before?
60s, yeah, when they first went to colour, yeah, red was a bit of an issue. It's because you've got to remember all the technicians were predominantly working in black and white, and they really knew how to light black and white to get shadows and stuff. And when it all went to color, literally the order was that, you know, just flood the set with light, and certain colors reacted in a certain way, and red was always the problematic color when it first, you know, when lots of these shows first went to color. So you do get red, but it was always an issue to get it right. So they tended to stay away from red where possible.
I haven't got the credits in front of me, but I've got a feeling the princess didn't even get a credit for this. No doubt someone will correct me if that's wrong.
Yeah, bit of trivia, that Egyptian mummy there in the exhibition is the same Egyptian mummy that was in an episode of The Persuaders, obviously from the Pinewood backlot, Pinewood prop store. There you go. Useless information.
Yeah, but that's what we're here for. So that one there.
Yeah. I think the thing is with all these things, you know, half the fun is watching to see what props turn up in.
Oh, of course it is.
You know, this one and that one. And
I do like the classic Range Rovers they use in this series.
Yeah.
I suppose the only thing is that I'm so used to Steed vintage cars. Now, I know that's my fault for being stuck in the 60s, but he does have a vintage car and Dead Men Are Dangerous, and it gets burnt, doesn't it? It gets bombed or whatever by the baddies, but we never see him driving. I mean, Steed and Range Rovers.
I suppose that's of the time, isn't it?
Yeah, but he's not of the time, is he? Steed is timeless.
Yeah. I suppose.
There we are, a blur of action again. Now, you're not going to tell me, Philip, that he's being too severe. She's being too severe on these guys, are you?
I think here it's perfectly justified. Yeah, I think here it's absolutely fine. Yeah, there is a couple of the kick we just saw misses him by miles, but that's part of the fun of it, isn't it?
Yeah, a million miles away, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I suppose the lovely thing with the mummy there is you just know it's going to come into the action again, don't you?
Yeah. So I see that someone has Joseph again. Thanks, Joseph. He said that the princess was Paula Churchill and she was not credited. I like it when people can do that. So thank you, Joseph.
Well, Joseph is a huge ITC vehicles man.
Right.
He's done loads of YouTube bits on Danger Man, Persuaders.
Jimmy Davis, camera operator there, and he was a lovely guy. He worked on Persuaders. He worked on a couple of things actually that we know about.
The locations are great on that episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes so quick.
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
it?
it does nip along that one, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah, the pacing of it is really good actually, because some of them are a little bit draggy, I find.
But the museum fight is lovely, beautifully choreographed. It's not too long.
Yeah. So I've been staring at my screen as opposed to staring at this screen here. I've got two going on, so
I think there's a little nod there with the mummy to the Iron Maiden in the Diana Rigg Castle Dieth episode, where the baddie at the end ends up getting skewered in the Iron Maiden.
Yeah,
I'm sure he was thinking of that.
Yeah. Did Clements write that? I can't remember.
Yes, he
It's
did.
Midas, isn't it?
He didn't write Castle Dieth, no.
No, but he
it
wrote
wouldn't
that,
have
didn't
stopped
he?
him from
No, I
lifting
meant
it.
Midas Touch. I can't remember who wrote it. I should have checked beforehand.
I mean, that's one of the weird things with the scripts, Philip, on this series, is that an awful lot of them was started either by Dennis Spooner or Brian Clemens, and then they swapped scripts, which I've never heard of in any other show. I mean, obviously, I've got a dad who wrote 200 TV scripts. I've never heard of anyone swapping scripts halfway through. So I don't know what the idea was behind that. Would you know, Jazz?
Maybe just for creative, like I've started on this one. I'm halfway through it. I'm a bit bogged down. Hand it over.
Can you think of any other shows though where that happened?
You do get those things like where you get someone writing a script from a story from. So true. Someone would get like a writer would give the story outline, which is basically, for those people who don't know, a story outline can be anything from 3 pages to even up to sort of 10, 12 pages if it's very detailed.
Yeah.
So that that is then fleshed out by a script writer. But usually those story ideas are from script writers, and it could be just that they didn't have enough time to write that episode, and literally just like give it to the next person, say, look, there's the idea, you just write it because I've got to write this episode for this series. Because if you look at all those writers, there was a sort of pool of writers around that time. You do get the odd one turning up here and there who might have written 1 or 2, but there tends to be that same sort of gang of about half a dozen of them, your dad included, that kind of wrote for all these shows. And
Terry Nation.
Yeah, Terry Nation, Philip Broadley, Brian Clements, Tony Williamson, Donald James, and if you look at them all, between them, they've probably written, half of all these sort of film-based shows, like TV series. So, whether they be ITC or Avengers or what, or even going on to things like Sweeney, Minder, Callan, whatever, although you do get other writers in with those kind of Thames dramas, but predominantly, I don't know, I'm trying to think if there was any scripts that are sort of swap scripts. I know that Philip Broadley wrote one for this and it was turned down apparently, and then it turned up as being slightly rewritten and credited to Brian Clements, which was a bit naughty, but there we go.
They should have used more writers on the show.
Yeah,
I think that's without doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's a case like you have nowadays with something like Doctor Who, where the Brian Clements was essentially a modern day sort of showrunner, wasn't he? So whether he would have pretty much always wanted to sort of contribute a little bit to a script and would sort of always kind of sort of, shape it, and it's give it a bit of finesse. I imagine he was always sort of.
He wanted control.
Yeah.
And that had been the same in the 60s when it went on to film as well.
He got that though from Ralph Smart, because Ralph Smart was a bit like that. We're right at the start of the 60s, like right at the start of like British film TV series, say like Robin Hood, and then moving it actually into Danger Man, which is where sort of I think Clements and Smart sort of first came across each other in a very sort of professional relationship, working relationship. I think a lot of Ralph's sort of little tactics is the wrong word, but things he did rubbed off quite a lot onto Brian. So like, Ralph would look at a script and change 2 or 3 lines of dialogue and then put his co-writing credit on it, you know, rather naughtily, to make sure he got half of the writer's fee. But there we go. I'm not speaking ill of the dead, because I actually think what he did was great. I'm just trying to explain to people what actually happened at that time. You know, I think Ralph Smart was actually a very, very key, important part of, you know, if we jump from the Avengers to ITC a minute quickly, he's a very important person in that whole world of setting all of those shows up and getting the whole thing running it like you know, like feature films were run at the time, you know, so but on the small screen. So that I'm not dissing him at all. I actually just wanted to explain that kind of that's how it worked.
I guess where the New Avengers is different in the mid-70s from most other shows is it's still being made on 35mm film.
Yeah.
Because obviously all the Houston film stuff is 16.
Yeah.
I think a lot of ITC had gone to 16 by then, hadn't they, Jazz? You know,
well, they had, but well, obviously Return of the Saint, which is you know, made at the same time as this, you know, that was 35mm, you know, it had to be really.
Yeah.
16 can look all right if you want that gritty look, and it can polish up nicely, but you know, it's not the same.
And where do you guys think this episode sits in the New Avengers? Do you think it's sort of in the top 5, or how do you guys rate it?
No,
I haven't really got a top whatever, but I do think story-wise, the first season, whatever, is much stronger. But then you get some drivel in there, like Norse and things like that, which I think is terrible. But I mean, some of them are really good episodes. I mean, like Sleeper, I think is fantastic.
Sleeper's brilliant. It is slightly taken from The Hour That Never Was, but
of course it was. Yeah,
but no, I think Sleeper, for me, the top 3 in the first season are Cat Amongst the Pigeons. For me, is the best New Avengers by miles. Beautifully directed. It's Hitchcock. Vlad Shaybal is a brilliant villain.
Yeah,
absolutely stunning. And then Target and Sleeper. I think Target and Sleeper are both great.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Dead Men Are Dangerous in the second season.
Yeah, I'm just
my only argument against Dead Men Are Dangerous would be that it is pretty solemn. Whereas those other ones have all got, you know, some quite good fun in them.
Yeah, I'm terrible at remembering these. Angels of Death, that's the one with
Terrence Alexander, but all the disco scenes.
Yeah, and Caroline Munro.
Yes.
Yeah, I quite like that.
Well, that's got the greatest New Avengers line when Joanna Lumley is sneaked into the fat factory, and and Caroline Munro goes, "Don't tell me you need to lose weight."
Yeah, that's brilliant.
No, I do like that one. That's fun. I like K is for Kill. But
well, what are your 3 then, Philip? You've asked us.
Well, I suppose just touching on the French ones, I quite like The Lion and the Unicorn. I think that's it's quite fun, and
it's a bit Pink Panther-ish, isn't it?
A little bit. I mean, I think it's quite an interesting one. The Canadian ones, I suppose, Forward Base is quite a good one for the Canada for. But I suppose the best episodes probably I do like Eagle's Nest. I think it's a very good.
Great location as well.
Yeah.
The trouble is, it's a repeat of the Nazis again, isn't it? Which is a bit of a.
You always get it.
It always crops up in these shows. So, like the Nazis are coming back, and it kind of is. It's just a sort of same old storyline, really, with that one. Although the location is fantastic.
At least they've made Peter Cushing a goodie in it, which is a nice twist. I think Trap is the worst. I think Trap should never have been made, and Gladiators is awful. And of course, Gladiators got banned in the US, and I've got a feeling it was censored in Britain. In fact, I don't think some of the British ITV regions showed it first time around. It's just a nasty episode. I mean, you've got guys rotting in the boot of a car. That's not Avengerland.
No, that's much more professional.
It
really,
is much
isn't it?
more professionals.
Yeah. Which I must admit, I did the Professionals DVDs in Australia, and Professionals was one of those shows that was on at the time that, you know, we all watched, a bit like this, Return of the Saint, you know, Hammer House of Horror. But when I watched it back, I thought this is rubbish, really. And I'm sorry for people if they do like it, but when I look at it now, I just think, yeah, it's just nothing to it, you know. It's run of the mill.
Speaking of Canadian ones, Complex is quite an interesting idea. The building that's trying to kill you. I think that's quite a good one.
But we'd already had that with the house that Jack built. You know,
well, yeah.
We'd already had the killer building, and that had the beautiful sets. Yeah, I mean, it's not terrible, Complex, but you know, I don't want to see episodes where, like Emily, where you've got a bowler hat on the top of a car going around. You know, please.
Yeah,
but that's just me. I'm a bit of a, you know.
I suppose it's a fun little thing as an idea, but whether or not you want the whole episode, it's perhaps it runs out. But I suppose top three might be Eagle's Nest, Last of Cybernauts.
Really, Cybernauts. See, I think Cybernauts worked once in black and white.
Yeah.
In color, it was.
In color, it survives because of Peter Cushing.
Yeah, but even then, really, it's not great.
The end of Last of the Cybernauts, they end up spraying him.
I know, and then Last of the Cybernauts, I think.
Last of the Cybernauts.
But no, I mean.
You're not a fan of Target then, Philip? You don't like that one?
That's going to be the other one I was going to say, Target. Yeah. Again, it's a real classic.
Well, that's a lovely location. It's almost dressed as a set, isn't it? I like Sleeper because it was very ambitious. I think they use about 30 locations in London. And I thought that was fun.
Yeah, by far the most adventurous in terms of the idea, the filming, and all of it. And I think that's why I liked it. You know, I like it so much as in this series. I think that's why it's the best one.
And of course, sorry, go on, Philip.
I would say there was some fun stuff in things like Three-Handed Game and Obsession's quite a good dramatic episode.
Well, you've got Purdy smacked in the face, which is quite a shock. Because again, it's not the sort of thing you'd have got in the 60s version. This is very much one foot in the real world, isn't it? In the new Avengers, which some people don't like. I do enjoy, and just watching this episode now, that 50 minutes flew by. As Jazz said, it didn't drag. Yeah,
there are some people that really don't like, who like the 60s Avengers, but then really don't like new Avengers. But then I think they probably are the same people who like
the Saint and not
well, I was going to say the Avengers on film, but they don't like the Honor Blackman and what is left of, say, Hendry episodes. It seems to be that they only like Diana Rigg and Linda Thorson. But yeah, it might be the same with the Saint. You know, there are people out there who really don't like Ian Ogilvy as the Saint. You know, they're comparing, but then I think you can't compare. You know, you just have to let them be what they are. It's the same when people compare Bonds. You know, well, of course Sean Connery is different to Roger Moore because it's a different decade for a start. You know, and they're playing it slightly differently. They have to. You know, you can't just be a carbon copy. There's no point in doing that.
I think that's part of the charm, isn't it? I mean, Philip, you were saying before the episode that the Avengers was always evolving. And I think that applies probably to Bond or to Doctor Who or to whatever else. If it just stayed the same each time the actors changed, you know, I don't think that would work.
Yeah.
I mean, I was distraught when Tom Baker took over because John Pertwee was my Doctor. But then, you know, you can't blame Baker for playing it differently.
No. Well, I mean, I wasn't distraught. I just remember, like, you know, that's the first time I remember Doctor Who was Pertwee, you know, Sea Devil's Green Death. And I didn't see any of the Troughton, so I was unaware that he changed. And when he changed, I was like, all right, fine, because I wasn't really a fan of it, if you know what I mean.
No.
So it, and like, sorry, you mentioned Tons of Wang Chiang earlier, you know, and actually some of those Tom Baker stories I quite enjoyed at the time. You know, they were all right. You know, they're pretty good. Those, I don't know what season it was. I'm not really a Doctor Who fan, but it felt like it was quite early in his sort of run of episodes. So, you know,
I think it was his third or fourth year, something like that. I mean, he did 7, so he had a long run, but
yeah,
it was in the earlier half, I think, you know, the first half as well.
But did you have a favourite
I gave
Bond,
up watching shortly after that. Sorry?
Favourite Bond, did you say?
Yeah.
I quite like Roger Moore. I mean, I think a lot of it's to do with me liking Roger Moore as a person, and I think that's sort of, I think they're all very different, as Jazz was saying, different eras, different decades. And I like them all for different reasons. I think, if they all seem to be good, as long as they're good actors, you know, and they're good stories and everything, then, you know, it's 100 people, 1,000 people have played Hamlet over the years. What's wrong with having somebody else playing Bond or Steed or whatever it is? I mean, if you were to, that's the thing. If you're going to remake the Avengers, what would you?
Oh no!
What would you remake? Would it be Henry? Would it be? What do you?
I think they tried with that horrendous movie, and it was absolutely appalling.
Yeah.
And I think that with all these things, they should just be left. And I don't mean that anything that, you know, oh, you can't touch our beloved shows. They were just timepieces of their time. You know,
you can't recapture the spirit.
You can't recapture the spirit of the 60s. And actually, there's lots of great shows out there now that are doing it differently anyway. So just go with them, you know. And I don't really like this whole thing of looking back all the time and trying to recreate. You know, we look back at stuff on our podcast and talk about it, but I don't want them to remake The Persuaders and I wouldn't have wanted them to make a second season of it, for example. Well, as soon as Roger Moore stopped saying I don't want to do it anymore, that's it. I'm happy with the 24. You know, I know they planned to do 4 or 5 years of it, but
also, isn't there serendipity in that sometimes an actor comes along and it's the perfect part for him? You know, Patrick McGowan was perfect as John Drake, Danger Man. Patrick McNee is John Steed. You can't have anyone else play him.
No, you can't.
It was the part he was born for. And for me, actually, Roger Moore, you know, the Saint is the part he was born for, even more than Brett Sinclair or Bond. I mean, I think controversially he was too old for Bond by the end, but that's just my view.
He was at the end. I don't think he was for Live and Let Die. I think
no.
But yeah, I mean, you can't, after they only did, you know, they had that experience with Lazenby only doing one. They couldn't really just have him for one. They had to have him for more than one.
But he is Simon Templar, isn't he?
Well, I suppose predominantly, yeah, he is. Yeah. For many people, he would have been. Like you say, Connery, like for those same people, Connery was James Bond and Patrick McGowan was Danger Man, you know? So, yeah.
But I don't think you can recapture the spirit of the times. You know, we see it all the time with reboots. You know, they've rebooted Magnum and Hawaii Five-0. You can't recapture the spirit of those times.
No.
I'm just an old fart.
I would agree. I mean, the New Avengers is a bit different in the respect you had, you know, you had Patrick McNee to anchor the show, and therefore it was kind of sort of almost like not a remake, but a continuation of it. And I think if you were going to bring back some of these shows, I would almost like to see it like they've done with Doctor Who, keep it in continuity somehow. So seeing what the Avengers organization is doing now, rather than sort of trying to because what's the point of recasting great actors like Patrick McNee? What, just have somebody new? And
I suppose the thing is, how many episodes of the Avengers are there? 160? Plus then add another 26 of the new Avengers. Isn't that enough? You know,
what more can you kind of do?
You know,
yeah, I don't mean that horribly, but that is plenty.
Yeah.
You know, it's a bit like the Saint, 118 episodes of the Saint.
Yeah. Danger
was
Man
tired by the end of
85
it.
or
Yeah, he was tired by the end of it. He didn't need to do anymore. And sometimes I think 118 is probably too many, you know.
yeah.
And that's not a criticism. It's just like, you know, sometimes shows should probably end something like that. You know, the Saint, I don't mean it, you know, I like the Saint in color. It's not the same as the Saint in black and white, which is amazing. Saint in color's fine, it's good. But let's face it, we could have had 10, 15 episodes less and it would still be fine. You know?
Just think if it had been the US, Jazz, they'd have made 330 of them.
Yeah, bloody hell. Bloody hell, they would, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you guys know why they made 2 series of 13 episodes for New Avengers rather than because you're still getting series of 26.
13s are a quarter in America. They're quarter season. They're like, so in America, the year is broke up into blocks of 13. Okay, so originally, like if you're an ITC show, like let's say Fireball XL5 or something like that, which is, you know, I'm using that as an example because it's got 39 episodes, meant you could show for 3/4 of a year, and then you could repeat another 13 without people hopefully noticing, which means the show could run for a whole year. So the thing is with 13, it meant that you could get a quarter of a season, although they would never have shown a quarter of a season. But that's why you wouldn't have got, say, 6, because that would have been considered a mini series. You had to have a certain amount, and a quarter of a season probably was what you would need to require to make it a season.
Well, I mean, they were going to make another 13, Philip. There was going to be the 3rd season, and they'd have stayed in Canada and gone to West Germany and I think Australia. And, you know, the irony is that New Avengers was held up because it didn't sell into America. And then when it did sell into America, it was massive on CBS late night movie time. And CBS offered half the money for a 3rd season. And LWT offered another 30 grand, and they couldn't find the final 30,000 per episode. But to be honest, if they were going to carry on making it abroad, maybe it was better just to stop, because to me, it is a quintessentially British show. I don't know if Jazz would agree.
I agree. Yeah. Like I say, sometimes it's best just to cut your losses and say, right, that's it.
Less is more.
Yeah. I don't think, you know, you say like the Avengers in West Germany. I can see like maybe one episode in Berlin with a sort of, you know, an agent going across Checkpoint Charlie kind of thing, working as a 1 episode, but like more than one. Well, what else can you do besides that? You know, and the New Avengers in Australia, you have to remember, like, you know, we know a lot about Australia now. Well, comparatively, we know a lot more. But back then, you know, going to Australia seems, it was the other side of the world, and it took you like a couple of days to fly there, and we didn't really know much about it, you know. And in some ways, yeah, it might have been good to sort of bring that into people's homes. But I remember Minder went to Australia for a couple of episodes with Gary.
Well, Morse went there as well.
Yeah, and I just kind of think it didn't work. Minder in Australia didn't work, even though it was the most popular show there, you know.
Because what made Minder was those same broken Britons of London locations we've been talking about. And what made Morse was Oxford.
Yeah.
You don't want Morse, you know, in Sydney or...
No, because you're taking an essential part of what makes the series work out of the formula, if you know what I mean, and you're dropping them into somewhere else where, well, not being funny, if you drop them into Sydney, Australia, you might as well drop them into Auckland and New Zealand, or San Francisco, or I don't know, Rio de Janeiro. It could be anywhere, you know. I don't know. The only time that works is if, you know, say like the Persuaders, which was built around them being in, say, the south of France, or them going to Rome for an episode, or them supposedly going to Stockholm for an episode. That it was meant to be like, you know, their sort of international jet setting Playboy.
Yeah,
so that
it's not just been added on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys have any final thoughts about the episode before I show the video contributions?
I mean, I think it flows really well. It's super locations. It's not in my top 5, but if all the episodes, particularly in series 2, had been as good as that one, then I think you would have wanted more.
Oh yeah.
I thought the pace was good. Location's fantastic. Steed wasn't in it so much, which, you know, I say he's kind of sort of sidelined a bit like the mother character. You know, I mean, kind of Purdy, I think, probably drove this episode out of the 3 of them. Nothing wrong with that. And in fact, it's great. My thing with this one is I thought the villain was a bit poor, you know, personally. But yeah, John Carson's great. There's lots of very nice plus points to this, but there are a couple of like
nicely directed.
Yeah, great direction.
So yeah, I'll proceed with the video contributions. The first one is from Lionel Guyett, who plays the ill-fated Taman in the pre-credits and then the first minute roughly of the actual episode. So this is about 16 minutes long, so talking about a bit about his career in general, but most of it is quite relevant to the episode. What's interesting is that Lionel hadn't seen the episode, I think probably since it was originally transmitted, and he begins interestingly talking about what he believes was the actual scene and everything, and of course it just shows the the effect that the passage of time has on memory, but he does get it pretty accurate at, considering the time frame. So let me just share my screen a second. Can you see me? Can you see me again?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, guys. Just going to say before, just in case it might be relevant. When I share the screen, my audio will cut out. So if you want to talk to me, I won't be able to answer you. I can hear you guys, but I can't actually respond. That's just how Zoom's changed it for some reason. So you won't hear me. I'll get on with it now. Oh, hi, Lionel.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. Good evening.
Good evening. So thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me about the New Avengers and your wonderful career. So yeah,
My pleasure.
The New Avengers comes along.
It wasn't a great big part. If I remember rightly, we were driven out. There were 3 or 4 of us. We went to, I think it was Beckton Gasworks, which was where Stanley Kubrick filmed the battle scene from Full Metal Jacket.
Right.
There's a scene where they're all the GIs, all the Marines are going through these explosions in the dusk and the dark, and that's where, because he filmed most of his films, Stanley Kubrick, because he lived. Funny enough, I auditioned for him and didn't get it for 2001: A Space Odyssey. So we arrived on the set, which was derelict, and there were just the odd buildings, one of which, as far as I remember from the plot, there were 4 of us who were either working for somebody and we were going to go in to this building to either get something or rescue somebody. And so we were all wearing boiler suits, and I think we may even be wearing masks and caps. So there were 3 sort of lower rank and 1 guy who played, who was further up the pecking order, and he was controlling us.
Yeah.
So we sort of went, if I remember rightly, across the ground to this thing. We went in, and then there were shots of us either doing things or trying to get something, and then we were either deliberately overcome by poison, or somebody, or the poison in the building overcame us. And then we all collapsed. And then Linda Thorson, who was then playing the Diana Rigg part, came and examined us. And that was the end. It wasn't the greatest part in the world, but it was fun to do. And I had a whole morning on it.
Well, I've got a little clip of it. I don't know if you want me to show you. Would you like to see it?
Yes, please.
Share my screen. So, because I think it was Southall Gasworks. That's
was it Southall?
It comes up on Google as anyway. I believe it's like a lot of, looked like quite a miserable place at the time, but I think it's now being renovated into this multi-million,
right,
and that's going to afford a house on it sort of thing, like so many places in these old
right, thank you.
Just see if I can
So I was wrong about Stanley Kubrick. It wasn't. We may have you anyway. I don't know. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
It certainly would have been a similar place.
That's.
So.
Thank you, Philip. That's brilliant.
Right. So yeah, 776. That.
Gosh, yes.
I'll just exit. Stop share. A morning's work, sort of back in 76.
Fun to do.
Yeah. And interesting, you're the only person apart from the one of the principal guest stars that actually speaks in that scene.
Yeah, I didn't. Good God, thank you.
Yeah. So you're very much the lead guard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why the guinea pig decided to bite me, nobody else.
Yeah. And I think what's quite interesting is the Avengers has always had this, where it's kind of sort of turned expectation on its head a little bit. You think they're going in to get John Carson's character or something very dangerous, or it turned out to be this little cute little animal that, and of course does you in. You mentioned you had worked with Diana Rigg.
I did at the National. We did. I was wasn't the last play I did. It was coming towards the end of my time there. And Tom Stoppard wrote a new play called Jumpers, which had Michael Hordern, David Ryle, Diana Rigg, Graham Crowden, and then a lot of those of us who were, we weren't playing nothing. We established some sort of reputation at the National. We played the Jumpers, who were gymnastic professors. So we didn't have very much to do, but we appeared in a couple of scenes, and Diana Rigg played Michael Hordern's wife, and I think she was a music hall star. And the coda was us, all the Jumpers, on stage in yellow with a J on, and we did a lot of gymnastics. And then Diana Rigg came in on a moon and sang, I think she sang Sentimental Journey. Gonna take a sentimental journey. And we danced round her and took her off and danced around the stage with her. And then we finished, and then that was the end of the play. But she was a really charming woman. And when I first went to the National, an actor called Ben Whitrow, in order to get through when we weren't rehearsing, or sometimes you were a walking understudy, it taught me bridge. And so I learned to play bridge with him and various other people. And Diana Rigg played bridge. So in the between shows, we would go to her dressing room and play bridge with her. Those of us that could. There was me, David, can't remember his name, and a couple of other people. So Diana, we would play in her dressing room. And then, we would play for an hour or two, and then we would go on stage. And at the towards the end of the run, she took all us jumpers out to lunch, to supper, with her partner at the time, Michael Philip Saville, somewhere up in Swiss Cottage, just to say thank you for being us.
Yeah, lovely.
And she'd just done, before she came to the National, the Bond film with George Lazenby.
Oh, yes.
And she'd won, you call it winning, the mini moke that she drove around in that. So we went up there in something and she arrived in a mini moke, which I think they either gave her or she said, I'm having this. She was a very, very nice woman, sad, and, a very, very good actress and lovely, good actress.
Yeah. Yeah, as you say, it was sad, of course, that she's no longer.
No, a good company member. That's another thing that matters to places like the RSC and the National. If you can put on at the end of it, they put, lousy actor but good company member, you've probably crossed one of the bridges.
Yes. The one actor, the main cast member that you did have your scenes with was David Swift, who played Turner. Do you have any memories of David Swift?
Only in that. I was going to ask you who he was. Yes, I mean he worked. I never worked with him again, but he was a very, very good supporting actor. But more than a supporting actor, he played leads. He was a supporting lead in good television because he was good. He looked good. He had a nice threatening air, or quite a good comedic air. Had weight, height, good voice, and you knew what you would get from him. If you cast David Swift, that's what you got. And that's really often what happens to an actor, is that people will use you time and time again because that's what they want.
I mean, one actor that you don't have any scenes of in the episode, but you do encounter on The Duchess of Duke Street is Ronald Lacey. I don't know if you had any encounters with Ronald Lacey at all.
Yes, I do remember Ron Lacey. I wonder if I'd work with him again. He was an extraordinary man because he was I'm going to say he was peculiar. He wasn't peculiar. He wasn't an actor with looks. He was an actor with personality. He was a brilliant character actor.
And do you remember liking the episode of The New Avengers? I mean, we're quite happy seeing it again just now.
I loved watching it now. I mean, God, if it was on, I'd watch it. I'd tell my agency, watch this episode of The New Avengers because I'm in it.
And I suppose, did you ever find that being in popular shows like that can have a knock-on effect in work you get, or is it
didn't for me?
Not for you.
No. I mean, I wasn't playing a big enough part for people to say, God, look at that young actor. We must use him. I mean, I didn't disgrace myself, but it wasn't something you'd say, God, he's got stuff. I did my job. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. Went in, at school I'd handled a rifle, so I know how to do that. I liked guinea pigs, even though one bit me, and I knew how to die and be carried off screaming to get shot or whatever it was they did to me.
I mean, so are you surprised? So we are here 45 years roughly on since. Are you surprised that I dropped you an email and said,
yes? Totally surprised because I'm not being, but I couldn't remember. In fact, as you see from my description of what I thought happened and what actually happens, is total rubbish. I mean,
Emily,
it's not that I'm not wearing a white boiler suit. I'm wearing a grey thing. I've got a hat and a rifle, and I've gone in to do something. No, I wondered why you chose me. but I was very flattered. All actors are flattered when somebody says, you know, I liked your work in this, I'd like to interview you.
Is there any message you want to say to the fans that are watching the Avengers?
Yes, thank you for being that dedicated to. They were groundbreaking shows. You know, the original Avengers broke ground. When Patrick and Diana were in it, that broke ground because it changed the media. And I thank you for being the fans of this show, because I would never have met Philip. I would never have done this. And although, to be honest, I've just put my life in order. All the programs that I've got and all my photographs that I've got, I haven't got that many. I've got enough, and all my plays I wrote out a long time ago, put my life in order like that. And there is, doing this has brought back so many memories, and there's so much, I don't mean this rudely because I feel it was so not again, but there's so much more that I was thinking about and other people that I've worked for, you know, stories. And in fact, actors tell stories because that's how they live. You know, do you remember when you worked with so-and-so? Oh God, yes, wasn't he a bastard? He wasn't a bastard to me. He was an absolute lovey. Oh, was he? Well, don't you remember? Oh God, yes. Oh, yes. You know, so, and it's brought back so many memories, and you prompting me. Thanks so much. I can say goodbye now.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right.
What a lovely man.
Yes, he is, isn't he? Yeah.
And I mean, I know from my dad doing DVD commentaries, it's incredibly hard 40 or 50 years later remembering everything. And it's sometimes only by rewatching it, isn't it, that it sort of sparks off some of those memories.
Oh yeah, I thought it was quite interesting. Him seeing it again and being, but you know, versus what he had in his mind. I mean, it was fairly close, but and yeah, I thought he was very nice guy indeed, talking to Lionel. I think we probably talked for about 2 hours in the end about various other things, but as a small role, but you forget that some of these roles are played by people with quite good acting chops. You know, Lionel has a very prestigious career when it came to theatre. Worked with Sir Laurence Olivier and all sorts of, when you see a little episode from 1976 in a couple of minutes, you don't really think of necessarily all the things that person might have done.
No, but it's a very strange career being an actor, because you assume these roles, and sometimes, as he said, it was just for a day, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Have we lost Jazz?
Yes, I think Jazz has had to go for something.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we just got one last video to show everybody. This is just 5 minutes, so it's nice and short and sweet. Renée Glynne, the continuity lady, for one of the continuity ladies for the show. She sadly passed away last April the 6th, so it's exactly 1 year ago, funnily enough. And she had done a number of events with me. I think we did 5 in the end. This is unseen footage from a rehearsal that we did before our first New Avengers event. So it is fairly sort of laid back in terms of of what we talk about, because it was never really meant to be seen. But I did obviously get permission from her son to show it. It talks generally about the Avengers, and one story in particular, a bit of quite a sad one that does place us around this sort of time of Midas Touch. There is a slight reference in the clip to a stall that she owned, which was actually in Last of the Cybernauts. If you remember the scene where the Cybernaut gets into Purdy's apartment and she smashes this stall over the Cybernaut, There's a paper mache and I think sort of quite fragile things, and she had one of the spare ones of them sitting in her house in Harrow. I'm not sure what's happened to it now, but it's a nice little keepsake that she had. So I'm sure lots of people watching this will probably remember the events I did with Renée. She's the reason why I'm here tonight in terms of doing the event. She was the first person that I actually interviewed, rather than just by email, actually in person. So I've got a lot to be thankful to her, and I do miss her all the time. We got quite friendly over a number of years. So this is Renée's contribution, talking about the Avengers in general. I'll just 1 second.
Oh, that's him.
There we go.
Yeah, but we have to.
Oh, there you are. See you now.
There. I will be in a moment. Oh, I've taken the Cybernauts pedestal out, ready for Cybernauts. They mustn't see it yet.
Oh yes, yes, that'd be nice reveal.
I was thinking about the episode because we took 2 weeks to shoot, and I somehow saw that it was 70 minutes, which is absolute rubbish. It's 40, 45, something like that. Yeah. Isn't it terrible that Gareth is dead?
Oh, a terrible shame. I've been to some event. There was a very big Avengers event for the 50th, so 10 years ago now, in Chichester, and Diana Rigg wouldn't go, and all sorts of people wouldn't go. But Gareth would have loved to have gone. If he'd.
Oh, I know, no, Rigg, of course. Oh, I know. Full, not just new Adventures, new Avengers. The Avengers.
It was the whole.
Anything, Rigg. Well, Rigg. I saw Rigg at the South Bank a year or so ago, and she could hardly bear to say anything about the Avengers, and the whole audience wanted her to be talking about the Avengers. It was her whole life. She didn't mention her daughter actress. She didn't mention her husband, and she hardly mentioned the Avengers.
Very odd, isn't it, really?
The audience were, very disappointed, really. I mean, I didn't mind, but they wanted that, and she didn't give it.
Did she mention Bond much at all, or did she sort of skirt?
Hardly, no. Hardly. But I mean, I saw her as straight actress. I mean, I didn't like the Avengers, and I didn't like her at all, because I don't like the structure of her face, because it's the same structure as a woman who ruined my life at one point. Oh, so I like people with that structured face.
Fair enough, yeah.
But from that interview, I kind of loved her because she was talking about her theatre stuff and all the other stuff. And she was very fragile and frail then. And there was an idiot interviewer who hadn't done any research, and he was saying the most ridiculous things at first, and I was in the front row and I was cringing and wanting to sort of correct him, which is like my job, isn't it, really? Anyway, I interrupted you. So she didn't want to go to the reunion. No. And Gareth couldn't, and Patrick Renée couldn't.
Patrick did do a little video thing that he sent through. Good. Saying hello to everybody, which is quite nice. So he would have been there had he been able to.
Yeah. He wasn't anti-it at all. No. And I can't. He did other work, but I can't quote anything that he did other than Avengers.
Yeah, he seems mostly well known. I mean, I know he did a Bond film with Roger Moore, and I think he played Sherlock Holmes at one point in various things. So I think, but in terms of him being a lead actor, you're quite right. The Avengers was
he was brought up by two mothers.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was very unusual at that, at the time, to anybody to talk about such a thing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, for someone that spent a lot of his later years in California, he was always the quintessential English gentleman type.
Yes, who had a father and a mother and grandparents and a castle and stuff. But it was not so.
No, that's right.
But he was really a very gorgeous human being.
Yeah, a bit like Gareth. I haven't heard anybody say anything bad about either of the two men. So it seemed that Patrick and Gareth were very much well loved.
No, I absolutely loved Gareth beyond belief. Unfortunately, I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, yeah. I have to remind you and remember something awful. By the time of the second episode, the stand-in, who was the absolute stand-in, sort of a permanent Avengers type stand-in, committed suicide, and she was a bit of a Brian Clements love. So that was unbelievably ghastly.
Yeah,
it was like an Easter weekend, a long weekend, whereby we didn't, they wouldn't have seen each other, and we didn't. So it was lonely. And she was about 40, I think. Can't remember her name, but it went boom just now in my head.
very sad.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to let you go. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously a bit frank in places, but I don't think anything she wouldn't have said quite happily on an event.
Well, she seemed a real character.
Oh yeah, yes, she was. I think she died at age 95, so I think that must be when she was 94. So
well, she wasn't doing badly, was she?
We should all be so lucky, really. I mean, it's obviously it was quite sad when she died, because I was due to talk to her only a few days afterwards, and I found out about half an hour before we were due to chat. So it was a bit of a. I mean, no matter how old somebody is, when they're great, it doesn't take the sting out, does it? If they when they die. And
no, all I'd say is, having had a father who had Alzheimer's and remembered nothing for the last few years, if you can remain as with it as she clearly was until the end, that's the best. I
mean, she lived alone. She still drove. She used the tube all the time. She used to, up to before COVID. She was an artist as well, so she would. You in London, you sometimes see paintings on railings, in Mayfair and stuff, and she did that. We should all be so lucky. It's very rarely do you get that kind of a, longevity, and she just passed away in her sleep. Didn't even know, and fine one day, not in the next. And we should all be so lucky. A life well lived, I think.
I mean, so far as Diana Rigg is concerned, she did mellow in the last couple of years, and obviously people can look out. It's a great interview with her at the BFI, where she's talking about the Avengers.
Yeah.
I think what people have to remember is, for those actresses in the 60s, like Diana Rigg and Alexandra Bastido from The Champions, they put up with a lot of stalkers, a lot of really unpleasant mail. And in many ways, they were happy to move on and do theatre where they weren't getting that attention from millions of males on TV every week. It's that, unfortunately, is the way of the world. And so I sort of understood why actresses like that sort of wanted to move on and not talk about the past.
Yeah.
But there we are.
I did hear one story when Diana Rigg was doing the Bond film in Switzerland, and she checked into the hotel on the first day, and of course everyone was very excited that Diana Rigg was staying in their hotel, and the guy at reception said, "Oh, welcome, Mrs. Peel." And apparently she walked out and she ended up hiring a little chalet thing. She was just couldn't, because of course it was quite recent back then, wasn't it, before her? But and then she didn't go to the 50th anniversary in Chichester, which I think was. But again, it's, I think you probably, as you say, you may have a sort of a love-hate relationship with something that makes you very successful, but comes with, say, some negative baggage as well. And also, if you want to be portrayed as a sort of very serious actress, maybe it's not that you don't want to be remembered for it, but you'd want to be remembered for other things. And I think it was this obsession, perhaps, with certain characters. When she died, everyone put, all the news channels put pictures of her as Emma Peel and
tied to the train, tied to the train tracks, that sort of thing.
I think she would have hated that, to be honest. I think she would have liked more of her career to be seen, but I suppose she kind of always probably knew that she'd be remembered for that. My apology to the interviewer who did interview Diana. If he, I don't know who interviewed her for that event, but Renée didn't like him. But
but no, as I say, I mean, for Diana Rigg, it made her career, but she needed to move on. And she was a fine actress. I mean, you watch her in a film like In This House of Breed, where she's a nun, and she's absolutely brilliant in it.
I saw on stage a few times, and brilliant. It was nice that she, was accessible in that respect. But,
no, I mean, they're not alone. Patrick McGowan always said afterwards, "I'm a prisoner of the prisoner." Sometimes people just keep on harping back to the previous role, and you want to move on. But I hope that was useful this evening.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you, Rodney, and obviously to Jazz as well for joining me. It was really, really good.
No, absolute pleasure. Who knows? Perhaps at some point in the future.
Oh yeah, yes, I'm hoping so. I've got some ideas that might perhaps fit our format quite nicely. So I'll keep you guys in the loop on that one.
Not a Canadian one.
I promise, not a Canadian one. Yes.
All right. Lovely to chat, Philip.
And with you. Take care, Rodney.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.